And I guess we get started here by measuring out our water. Important thing here, you don't need real warm water. This is going to be an overnight rise fermentation, so just room temperature. I'd like to measure it out at 70 to 75 degrees. That way it's consistent throughout the year. When your tap water is colder in the winter or warmer in the summer, you can keep it consistent. Um, yeah, here I am very slowly measuring out water. Of course, once you've got the water measured, so this is a yeasted dough. I have played with sourdough starters, but I really enjoy and think we've developed pretty good flavor with the amount of fermentation time and the combination of ingredients. And I actually prefer it. I've done the sourdough, and I love it when other people do it, but I do a yeasted dough. The next thing we're going to add is some sugar. I just learned just a few years ago, probably just 5 or 6 years ago, I was adding very little sugar, mostly just to feed the yeast. And then I talked to a friend of mine who's kind of a very famous pizza maker, and he suggested that if I wanted more browning in a home oven, a little more sugar wouldn't add a lot of flavor, but it does act as a really great browning agent. Next, we're going to add a little bit of olive oil. The olive oil does a number of things. It provides nice flavor. It actually helps, I believe, with the stretchiness of the dough and the texture. So olive oil. The next thing we're going to add is a little bit of high gluten bread flour. Please use high gluten flour. It's going to make a much better texture for your bread. I really like the stone burr and the I think it's called Shepherd's Mill or Shepherd's Grain. Anyway, either of those or any good bread flour that you can find make a nice chewy pizza. And next we're going to add some salt. I always use good kosher salt, diamond crystal if you can find it, which apparently nobody can right now. But salt is really important, and I use more salt than a lot of people because salt makes things delicious. And whenever I have pizza that doesn't have salt, it is sad and disappointing and very much like eating cardboard. So go ahead and get the flour and salt kind of, generally mixed together. Get your dough hook on your mixer if you are using a mixer, and God, I hope you're using a mixer. I used to do this by hand for years, and I would knead it by hand for like 10 minutes until it felt right. So, yeah, I pray you have a mixer. What you'll see here is over the course of 10 minutes, the change in the texture of the dough. We're really developing the gluten in there, and what that's going to give us is a nice stretchy dough. You've probably heard of doing the window pane test, so at the end of 10 minutes you could pull this out, take a little piece off, and pull it into a very thin little disc that you could stretch out, and it would be able to see through it without the dough breaking, and that's called the window pane test. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little flour here. We'll get the dough off the hook. I like to give it a little kneading for just 10 or 15 seconds, just to make sure it's got the right texture to it, that it's not sticky, before I put it in the bowl to rise. You've got kind of a nice smooth exterior. And just a little flour here. You don't want to add too much flour to the dough, but the flour that we've put here is kind of accounted for in the recipe. So just kind of get a medium-sized bowl with, I like it to have something with high sides, so when it rises it has something to kind of cling and rise with. Coat it in a little bit of olive oil, and then we put on what we call our bread hat. These are our bread hats. You can also just use like cling wrap or something, but just make sure it doesn't get a lot of air in there, which can dry it out. So on my oven I've got a proofing setting, so I put it on to proof, but for years and years and years I just turn on the oven for like 5 minutes, turn it off, and then put it in the oven to rest overnight. So here we are the next morning. Pizza dough has been rising overnight. Still got his hat on. And if everything did as it should have, we should have a nicely risen dough. And we do. Look at that. Next we punch the dough down. And then it's time to divide the dough in half. This is enough dough to make 2 sort of large pizzas. One of my goals in life is to someday, on the very first try, split the pizza dough perfectly in half. It may never happen, but you gotta keep dreaming. So now it's time to shape the dough balls. This is a bit of a trick. Actually, my wife is much better at this than I am. But as you can see, what I'm doing is turning it and tucking it under with my fingers and stretching it over the top with my palms to kind of create a skin across the top. And then I just squeeze that little hole I've created on the bottom to close it off so it won't create a thin spot later when I'm trying to shape the pizza. And then we just kind of roll it around, and then do this trick where I rotate it and kind of pull it against the counter and tuck my fingers on it or under it, which will kind of help make a really nice even dough ball. Make sure there are no holes underneath, kind of give it a little more shaping, and it is ready. And then just oil a nice good size bowl, something with a nice round deep shape. Kind of get the oil spread in there well so the pizza dough will come out, and get the dough ball in there. And now we'll take a little bit of cling wrap and just break off a piece big enough to cover the whole thing with a pretty good amount of room on either side. That gives me enough to tuck it in or around. I like to get it on there and then tuck it with my fingers so that the cling wrap is in complete contact with the surface of the dough ball, so we don't end up with any dry spots, which will cause problems when we try to stretch it later. And then off to the refrigerator it goes to slowly continue fermenting for the next several hours. And this is a little trick I just started a couple years ago, especially in the winter. I was finding it was taking forever for my dough to come to temperature before I stretched it. So I just take a sheet pan and add some boiling water to it and let it warm the countertop up so you get a nice resting time. And now we're going to mill some tomatoes. You can just use crushed tomatoes. You can pulse some in a blender. I like to take whole tomatoes, and I love this brand, the Alta Cucina from Stanislaw Tomatoes out of California. Really great tomatoes. This number 10 can is available at Big John's PFI down in the International District for $7. And that's enough tomatoes to make 10 pizzas, 5 pizza nights. And frankly, I like them better than the expensive imported Italian tomatoes that cost $5, $6 a can. So, little tip. So now I'm going to strain the tomatoes, something I started doing, oh gosh, several years ago. Just want to get a lot of the water out of those tomatoes so we don't end up with soggy pizza. Just put it into a colander and let it sit for a while. And as you can see, we have good 3+ cups of tomato water in here. This is great to save and cook rice in, by the way. And I just add about half a teaspoon or so of salt to the tomatoes I'm going to use for tonight. And that's it. That is my sauce. The tomatoes are going to cook on the pizza, so the idea of cooking them ahead of time just means the tomatoes get cooked twice, and you end up, I feel like, with very pasty tomato sauce. And check in on our dough, waiting for it to get close to 65 degrees so it's nice and stretchable. And there it is, good enough, let's do it. And we're going to start off the shaping by getting a generous amount of flour on the pizza peel. Some people like to use cornmeal, that's fine. Certainly makes it easier to get the pizza off of the peel. I'm not a fan of the flavor myself, so I use flour, but you do whatever you like to your pizza. And we get the pizza kind of shaped into a general circle, and then just kind of press around, get any large bubbles off of the edge, and create a little rim here. Once you've created your rim, you can get the pizza up on your fists and just use them to kind of gravity and the stretching with your fists to stretch the pizza. I do toss my pizza. I just think it's a lot faster and you get a really nice even stretch. But just using your fists and some gravity and some pulling does a great job. Just for some nice flavor on the edge, I love to brush a little extra virgin olive oil on the pizza. And then get your tomatoes on there. Not too much, just I'm just going to nice thin layer. And you're going to have to want to work a little bit quickly here. The longer the tomatoes sit on there, they end up soaking through a little bit, and that will get your pizza stuck to the peel. So work pretty quickly. And just don't let it sit around too long. Then you want to get the cheese on. I like to move the cheese around primarily around the edge first. That cheese on the edge, as the edge rises, is going to kind of move towards the middle. So I tend to do a little heavier on the edge and thinner in the middle. And then I blow under the pizza. Make sure there's no stuck spots, and helps release it and give it a nice pillow to slide off. And give it a little shimmy off of the peel. Start on the back edge and just shimmy your peel out of there, and there you go. 7 to 9 minutes, kind of depends on your oven. And then I do a little trick where I move the pizza from the stone down to a baking steel that's been in there, just to kind of finish off the bottom of the pizza for 30 seconds. If you don't have a steel, it's no big deal. The stone works great. And there it is, nice big bubbles, nice browning. That's partly because of that sugar that we put in there. You get a great little hole structure. So delicious, crispy, light, tasty pizza.